So anyway, the first time I saw Star Wars, I was stoned off my ass. Which is ironic, really, because it was also the first time I was ever stoned off my ass. It was the summer of 1977. I was staying with my aunt and my uncle in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Now, my uncle was in the Navy, and every time they moved him around, they moved him to a major metropolitan area like Goose Creek, South Carolina. Anyway, I was 12 years old, I was halfway through the Star Wars novelization, and I was ready, I was primed for the greatest cinematic experience in the history of cinematic experiences, Star Wars! I went to bed the night before, bouncing off the walls, vibrating from head to toe, because tomorrow I was going to see Star Wars! And I woke up the next day, barely able to lift my head off the pillow. I was cold and clammy from head to toe. My insides felt like a wet rag being twisted. But I couldn't let my aunt and my uncle know I was sick, because if they knew I was sick, they might not take me to see Star Wars! So I threw myself onto the floor, dragged myself across the hallway, threw myself into the shower, and approximately 10.2 minutes later, I dried myself off, dressed myself, straightened myself up, plastered a smile on my face, because today I was going to see Star Wars! Anyway, the plan for the day was to go into Charleston, pick up the tickets for a mid-afternoon show at the theater, then head over to the mall, hang out there until it was time for the show. We got into Charleston. We picked up the tickets. We went to the mall. We went to the food court. My uncle asked me, he says, "Kid," he called me kid, he says, "Kid, what do you want for lunch?" Now, the little tiny bit of Rice Krispies I'd eaten that morning had been trying to snap, crackle, and pop their way up through my esophagus and up my ears, mouth, and nose ever since. So no, I didn't want anything to eat. But I couldn't let them know that, because if they knew that, they might know I'm sick, and if they knew I'm sick, they might take me to see Star Wars! So I ordered my food court usual, a cheeseburger, French fries, and an orange Julius. Approximately 10.2 minutes later, the food court was covered in a stick, gooey, shiny layer made up of cheeseburger, French fries, and orange Julius. It was right around this time, my aunt and my uncle began to suspect I wasn't entirely well. My uncle took me to the restroom, he cleaned me up, he looked at me and he said, "Kid," he still called me kid, he said, "Kid, we don't have to see Star Wars today. We can come back on another day when you're feeling better." And I looked up at him and I said, "I want to see Star Wars." And he said, "Okay." And he reached into his pocket, he took out a pill bottle. And he handed me a capsule. He said, "Take this." So I took that. And approximately 10.2 minutes later, as we were coming into the theater lobby, I began to realize that the sick me and the want-to-see-Star Wars me had become separated from each other, pulled apart. The sick me was in a gooey, sticky puddle on the floor. The want-to-see-Star Wars me was about 3 feet back and 5 feet up, floating and bobbing and weaving and feeling pretty darn good. So I floated and bobbed and weaved my way up to the ticket taker. He took my ticket and he tore it. And I floated and bobbed and weaved my way down the hall. And I floated and bobbed and weaved my way into the cinema. And I floated and bobbed and weaved my way down the aisle. And I floated and bobbed and weaved my way into my seat. And approximately 10.2 minutes later, Star Wars came exploding off the screen and splashed down over my face, surrounding me in a typhoon of stars and wars and androids and explosions and all kinds of cool stuff. And I remember thinking, my uncle is the coolest uncle there ever was. Now, at the end of the summer, when I got back to my little hometown of Clinton, Massachusetts, and Star Wars finally got to our little out-of-the-way theater, I saw it 6 more times. But none of those times was anywhere as amazing as that first time with my uncle and that little capsule. Now, a couple of years later, when I was sitting around smoking pot with my uncle and taking mescaline with my uncle and snorting coke with my uncle, I remember thinking to myself, my uncle is the coolest uncle there ever was. Just goes to show you, kids are morons.